Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Australian horror films, and what better person to be talking to about Australian horror than Chris Stanley himself. How you doing, Chris?
Barry, how you going, mate? Thank you for having me on the channel.
It's an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks for saying yes to me, by the way. I want to talk about horror films or Australian horror films. And I was saying to Chris just off air there that I feel like Australian horror, Aussie horror, is like a subgenre on its own. And I absolutely love Australian horror. I've done a top 10 Australian horror movies a few years ago that I don't actually remember my top 10. And there is a few more that has been released since then. But Chris, yourself, I know you're from Australia, but are you a fan of Australian horror, or do you kind of cringe when you hear that Australian accent?
No, I don't. I really love it. I love having conversations with people like yourself, or like if you're in the States, or on social media, friends will be like, "Hey, I just checked this out. I didn't know it was made in Australia," and you hear the accents, and that was so messed up. I loved it. So we do have a few horror films up our sleeve. Like the main one everyone knows is Wolf Creek, but I feel like
Mm,
there's so much more that hasn't been tapped into yet by a wider horror audience. So, and like I said to you before we went live with this, there's some that I had to go in the deep recesses of my brain when you pitched this idea to me for this video. I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that one. I remember watching that one when I was a kid. That one messed me up. So I think what I love about Aussie horror is we know how to go dark and brutal when we want
yeah.
to. There's something about an Australian setting, whether it be the outback or I don't know, we just know how to go really twisted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think when people think Australian horror, like you said, the Outback is the one that people will go to most. But there are some kind of suburban ones that hit home as well. I've got a few suburban examples as well that we can go through. But yeah, I think when people, especially like people from the UK and the US, if they think Australian horror, they do think movies like Wolf Creek, which is kind of the Outback. Is that the Outback?
Yeah,
Wolf?
so that's based on the backpacker killer Ivan Milat, who
Yeah,
took backpackers into the Belangolo forest. So like geographically, the Belangolo forest is like an hour from where I am. Been there a
right.
couple of times, and it's creepy, like it's eerie, and apparently there's like more victims out there that they haven't found in that forest. So that's kind of like it just your psyche just doesn't want to be there. But
Yeah.
yeah, Mick Taylor is based on Ivan Milat, whereas you got like Leatherface that's based on Ed Gein and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But yeah, like Mick Taylor is our Freddy Krueger, put it that way.
Right. Is Wolf Creek and Mick Taylor, in fact, the whole Ivan Milat thing, is that big in Australia?
It is, yeah, yeah, and like Ivan Milat only died a few years ago. Like he obviously wasn't going to get out of prison, but he died in custody. I think he died of like liver cancer or something. Like he was a wrecked unit. But yeah, like it's always that like there's always new documentaries coming out about Ivan Milat. I've had an ex girlfriend of mine, her dad was an electrician and then did a job for Ivan Milat's mum, but it was listed under Millet. So they wouldn't put two and two together and be like, oh, it's a Milat. We're not going anywhere near them. But apparently the lady was very nice. So there's always like that 6 degrees of separation. There's
Yeah.
what my best mate, who's my groomsman, his uncle used to play with Ivan Milat's brother because they live down in Goulburn, which is near Belangolo. So it's crazy. Like it's also like, even though it's true, it's that folklore, like the Aussie boogeyman,
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah, we've got in Scotland, we've got one boogeyman that nobody knows. He's kind of like the Zodiac killer, like the US's
Mm.
Zodiac. He's called Bible John. I don't know if you've heard of
Bible
Bible.
John.
Yeah, Bible John.
Why
Apparently,
Bible John?
apparently he, before he killed his victims, he would recite some of the Bible to his victims. Now, this happened in the late 60s, early 70s. He went to a place in the east end of Glasgow called the Barrowlands. So it was like the Barrowland murders. And he killed three people, or three or four people, and he disappeared. And nobody ever
Mm.
caught him. But in the late 80s, there was a guy called Peter Tobin, who killed a young girl, and nobody knew who killed this young girl until 2007 because he
Mm.
was killing people from the 80s to the 90s. And then in 2007, a guy called Peter Tobin was caught after he killed a Polish girl in a church. He was like a handyman in a church in Scotland, in Glasgow. And people started to think, is he Bible John? Because he moved down to England and the
Yeah,
killings
right.
stopped in Glasgow, and then they moved back to Glasgow, and then the killings began again. And the description of Bible John is quite similar to Peter Tobin. Peter worked
Yeah.
in a church. Bible John was religious, etc. So there's a lot of big connections there to this guy. And Peter Tobin just died last year as well, and he's kind of
Mm.
notorious, similar to people like Ivan Milat in
Yep.
Australia. So it's funny that you guys have got your own boogeyman. So have we. I think every country, every state in America, they all have that kind of one person that is notorious and famous or infamous for the wrong reasons. And I feel like when you look at Australian horror, Ivan Milat, Mick Taylor, aka Mick Taylor, he's the one that a lot of people know about in
Mm.
different countries other than Australia themselves. Have you seen Wolf Creek 2?
I have. I've seen obviously one, two. I haven't watched the TV series. There's like 2 seasons, I think,
Yeah.
and John Jarrett reprises his role as Mick Taylor. What I love is like John Jarrett. I don't know what the equivalent would be over in Scotland, or if you guys have it. He used to host Better Homes and Gardens, like a lifestyle show here in Australia, and
Uh-huh.
he'd be like, "G'day guys, today I'm gonna teach you how to redeck your patio," and he goes on to play Mick Taylor. Like it was weird
Well,
when he got cast. We're all just like, what? The guy that teaches you how to pot a plant, like, and he did a damn good job.
and this is
Um,
after Wolf Creek. Is
no,
this
this
after?
is before Wolf Creek.
Oh,
No,
right, right.
he used to host Better Homes and Gardens with his then wife Noni Hazelhurst. She was a co-host on Better Homes and Gardens, and they're like,
Right.
yeah, g'day, we're going to redeck, da da da. You want to use a nice pine paint and stuff like that, and just a really upbeat, super nice guy. And then he gets cast as Mick Taylor. And when Wolf Creek came out, it was like 2005. I was in grade 11 in high school, and then grade 12 is when I finally saw it, and I was like, well, this is bad. Like it's like you suspend that disbelief when you got like like Freddy, Chucky, and all that, because it's imagination. But I'm like, this could really happen, and this has unfortunately happened.
Yeah.
And then with Creek 2, I didn't mind it. It was good, but I feel like they could have just left it at one. But I understand where they're just trying to cash in on the success of the Aussie boogeyman, and then the
Yeah.
series came along, which is streaming now, and I haven't watched it. Like I was satisfied with one, and then two came along. I'm like, yeah, that's enough. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the less I know about Mick Taylor, the scarier he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Wolf Creek 2 as well, and again, I thought it was pretty good. Good for a sequel to something that was supposed to be based on a true story. And
Hmm.
I've not seen the TV show either. I'll probably watch it because I heard good things about it, but
Yeah,
I've not
same.
dived into it. Yeah, and there's always been rumors of a Wolf Creek 3 coming out as well, which has still not happened. And I think
Yeah,
as John
John.
Jarrett gets older, then it's maybe not going to happen.
Yeah, the more time goes on, he's always like, yeah, it's gonna happen, and like he's always doing the rounds at our local conventions. There was one just this weekend that he was at, and he's always just at those conventions, and
Yeah,
yeah, it definitely has like marked its territory in like one of the most successful horror slashers of all time. And again, I think the first one was done so well, and he was relishing it. It was like the first time Robert Englund played Freddy. They're just so into it. They're immersed in it. And like, quoted for ages, head on a stick and stuff like that
mhm,
from the first Wolf Creek. And just brutal, gnarly, mean horror. Like,
yeah.
yeah, real hardcore horror.
I don't know how you felt about this scene, but the scene where he's just bumped into the backpackers and they're sitting at the campfire and they're telling jokes and he's telling a joke and he's like getting really serious but jokey at the same time and they're all like, I was like that. Oh, I'm sweating. Just I'm sweating for these characters because I don't know what he's going to do here.
Is
There's
that
some,
when he's doing the look and he's just looking at them, and then he just like breaks into laughter.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
That
yeah.
exact scene.
I remember watching that for the first time. And I'm like, oh, is he gonna gut them now? What's gonna go
Mhm.
on?
Oh, it was horrible. That's the kind of scenes I like to see. That tension building scenes in horror films. You don't really get that these days. It's all about jump scares now. But that's
Mm,
the type of film that I liked, especially back in 2005. I was 21 in
yeah,
2005, so it was peak horror for me because I loved those kind of films. It took us away from the usual slashers and the ghost stories and stuff. This was like
yeah,
pure raw horror. It was
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Speaking of John Jarrett, there is another film that I want to. Well, I don't really want to talk about it too much because it wasn't great, but it was I would say it was Australia's answer to Lake Placid in a way, and it was Rogue. Have you seen Rogue?
Oh, I have not seen Rogue.
All
Yeah,
right, John
I
Jarrett's in
didn't get
that.
it. I didn't even know he was in that.
Yeah,
So
not really
is it
recognizable.
pure horror, or is it like comedy slash horror, or is it just
So there's no comedy in it. It's
okay?
more just kind of monster horror.
Right.
Um, and when I saw John Jarrett in it, I was like, he looks familiar, and I had to IMDb it. I'm like, that's somebody I know, and then it's John Jarrett. I'm like, oh my god, it's John Jarrett. He had short hair in it. He doesn't have his the beardy thing that he has. He's got glasses in it
Yeah.
as well. Um,
Yeah.
I can't remember her name. Oh, it's totally escaped me now. Radha Mitchell.
Oh yeah.
She's
Yeah.
in it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Um,
It was always
and
on my list, and I'm like, I will get around to watching that one day. So I'm like, I need to like do myself a service as a fellow countryman and
mhm.
watch it. So yeah, I just have not got around to it. But I had no idea John Jarrett was in it. So there you
Yeah,
go.
I think you may enjoy it. Sam Worthington's in it as well. All
Oh
the
yeah.
Australian people, but the premise is pretty good because there's this rogue. Is it a crocodile or an alligator in
Crocodile.
Australia?
We
Croc,
get Crocs. Yeah.
croc. Right? So it's a big croc, and it's circling this group of tourists on this little boat, and they wash ashore onto this little island. But as the water's rising, the island gets smaller, so they're
Hmm.
stranded. So it's a good premise, um, but it's not the best. I think if you watch it when it's on. Don't like prepare yourself to watch this really good
Yeah.
Australian horror film because you're not going to get that. But it's fun, and I think you might enjoy parts of it. But I just thought maybe you would have seen it, but nah, it's okay. But I think it feels to me like Australia's answer to like movies like Lake Placid because they were bringing
Yeah.
out like backhanded sequels here and there, but it's not the best. Um,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And one that was in the deep recesses of my brain. Have you ever heard of the film Cut from 2000?
Kylie Minogue,
Yeah. Oh my
yeah,
god, I'm impressed, man. Well done.
yeah,
You need to get your citizenship right now.
yeah. G'day, mate.
Yeah, that
Um, I've
I
seen it
remember watching
once.
that on Foxtel. Like that was our big cable. Like it's still around. Like our
Mhm.
cable back in the day, and it was on the Showtime channel. And they just kept replaying it. And that was when I was about to start high school, and it would just play because mum and dad like had everything unlocked on that particular cable box, and it just played, and I'm like, oh my god, what's going on? Like how they try and finish the horror film, and then the person gets killed at the beginning, and just the killer as well with that weird mask with the stitched up face
Mhm.
and that weird hedge clipper thing that he's like the scythe. It's like a scythe and a hedge clipper all in one. And I just remember that the other day when you pitched this video to me, I'm like, I got to Google that just to brush up on that. I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
god, Kylie Minogue was in that.
yeah. I've seen it once years ago, but I want to watch it. I don't remember too much about it, so I want to watch it again. I've got the Blu-ray. I think it was Umbrella that released it. I'm
Yep,
sure.
Umbrella
Yeah,
does that. Yep.
yeah. So I've got that Blu-ray, so I'll probably watch that at some point to do a review for it eventually because I think it came out around the time of the late teens, early noughties teen slasher
Mm,
films, like
yep.
Urban Legend and stuff. So it felt like it should have been part of that kind of subgenre. So it's one that I think I'm going to check out again. It might be bad because it's like 24 years old now. So, um, do you remember it being any good? Is it worthy? Worthy?
Oh, it was so bad it was good, but
Right. One of
like,
those.
yeah, I think just crack a beer, get some snacks, and it's just so like relish in that cheesiness of like, late 90s, early 2000s. Because yeah, it came out in 2000, so it was smack bang, super low budget, like the most dodgy Wish version killer ever. But I like it still scared me back then, just because of like the implement he used, and I'm like, what is that? You can't get that from Bunnings Warehouse or Home Depot. Like, what is going on? And yeah, Kylie Minogue, like it's so Australiana but horror.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anything with Kelly Minogue I would have watched at the time anyway. Um, have you this is one I hadn't put on my list, but you reminded me of it. I don't know why. Um, there's a film called Storm Warning. Have you seen that?
No, I have not seen Storm Warning. No, who's in that?
So it's directed by Jamie Blanks, who directed Urban Legend and Valentine.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
He's Australian. He's like well, to me, I thought he was great. Um, Stormborn, it's like it reminds me of Rogue. It's so the backwaters. I wouldn't say it was like the outback. It's like the backwaters of Australia, where this couple were on this little stream and they get washed ashore. And these
Hmm.
guys and it's kind of like hillbillies, like Australian hillbillies,
Yep.
and they get washed ashore, and these guys are pretending to help them, but they've trapped them in their barn and they're trying to get out.
Hmm.
I've not seen it for a long time either, so I can't really comment on it too much, but I think because it's Jamie Blanks, I automatically thought it was Australian, and it might be an Australian film or set in Australia. I'm just trying to check the cast, but there's nobody in it.
If you check the location, like where it was filmed, that
Hmm.
yeah, usually you check that's always a good indicator. And also you can check out like what the other cast people have done. And if it says like Neighbours or Home and
Yeah,
Away, that's usually
definitely
a good
Australia.
indicator. Jamie
Yeah, it says
Blanks.
country of origin is Australia, and it was filmed in Melbourne.
Ah,
Yeah, it's
what
filmed in
year did
Melbourne.
that come out?
2007. It's
2000. Storm Warning. Yeah, okay.
it's a pretty underrated movie because I don't know anyone who's heard of it, and you're from Australia and you haven't heard of it either. So
No, I
it's
haven't. Filming locations, yeah, Central City Studios, Melbourne, Victoria. Okay, yeah, right. There you go.
so you'll probably have some on your list. If you have, I know you were thinking of some there. Is there any you think people might have not heard of or should watch?
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was you or Mike from We Watched the Movie. Someone did a video recently, and like not like last week, but like recently. The Loved
Mhm.
Ones. Have you
Okay.
heard of that?
It's probably I wouldn't say it's my it's my second favorite Australian horror film.
Oh my god, man! I was so late to the game watching that. I watched that and I put a review up on my main channel years ago. It might have been 2014 or 2015, and it came out in 2009. And I remember watching it. I'm like, that was the most fun I've had with a horror movie in God knows how long. Like, don't say no to the girl when she asks you to the formal next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that film, I've not done a proper review for that film yet because I feel like I will never be able to do it justice. There's something about it
Mm,
that it's an amazing horror film. There's what I can't remember her name. Is it Robin McLeavy? Her name is who
yes,
plays
yeah, yeah,
Lola.
that's
Yeah,
her. That's her.
she was incredible.
Yeah.
I think I'd done like a top 10 female horror villains at some point, and I think she was number one because she's batshit crazy in that film. She's incredible. I just think the whole premise of it as well is so creepy, where she takes these guys back to her house and she's got this little diary, and they never really go into the backstory of her parents as to
No.
why the dad helps her, and is that the mum next to them with the hole in the head? We just don't really know. Um,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Like the
what?
less is more.
Yep,
And
yep.
just what she puts that poor bloke through is
Mhm.
just like, yeah, like as I remember when my friend was like, "Yeah, let's watch this." I'm like, "What's this? I've never heard of this. Is this going to be any good?" And then by the end, I was like, "That was so good. I was missing out."
Yeah, yeah. And again, it keeps you on the edge of your seat because you don't know what's going to happen next. There's a few twists and turns that you don't expect. And I don't want to spoil things for people who've maybe not seen it, but like the her floor and stuff that's under the floor.
Yep.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I'm just like, wow, this is really good. Yeah, it's obviously unbelievable, but it's so good that the way it's filmed is almost like it's filmed like it's supposed to be based on a true story or something. It's a unique experience. I thought it was fantastic, and like I said, there's not a lot of people talking about it. Not a lot of people know about it, which is so bizarre. I love it. It is one of my favorite horror films. It's so good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a hidden gem for sure. And actually, I want to do a new video on it since posting my old video back on the Cosplay Chris channel and put it on like my new channel now because it just needs more eyes on it. Like it's kind of gotten buried, and not that it's bad. It's just people just don't know, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was just such a like a nice surprise when I watched it. But it's so gruesome. But
yeah,
like she is insane. Like
yeah.
I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was just so good. Like everyone played their bit. Like the dad as well, and the dad's creepy. And the dad's all dressed up as well for the formal. I'm just like, this is like from the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre when the family's having dinner and she's strapped to the chair. It's like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like Australia's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, I
Yeah,
went
yeah.
to I went to For the Love of Horror in Manchester last year. I was with Darren from The Slaughtered Lamb,
Oh
and
yeah.
we bumped into a girl dressed as Lola with the pink dress on and the little party hat.
The
And
crown.
yeah, and I went up to her and was like, "Oh my god, can I get a photograph with you? That's absolutely amazing." And she's like, "Yes." And she said that I was the very first person that night to recognize her. Nobody knew what she was dressed up as. And she's like, "Thank you very much for recognizing who I was." And I'm like, "I can't believe nobody knew who you were supposed to be." So it's just so rare for people to know. And I like that when someone's dressed up as a character from a film that nobody really knows.
Yeah.
Um, I can appreciate that. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
that just means that they just have a deep love for the character and they don't worry about it being mainstream or not. And yeah,
yeah.
I definitely appreciate that. And like this next one, like everyone knows, like the Babadook.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my favorite. That's my favorite.
That's
But
that was really good, and like it's definitely a thinker of a horror movie. Like it's very symbolic, existential,
mm,
but the imagery in it when you do see glimpses of the Babadook, I'm like, whew, that's good. Like I don't want to see the whole monster. I don't want them to reveal too much. So yeah, I definitely found a lot of enjoyment in the Babadook. It's definitely worth the hype.
so the Babadook is an interesting one that I want to talk to you about to see the difference between how it's advertised here, the US and Australia, because when the Babadook was advertised in the UK and in the US, I would imagine it was advertised as this sort of insidious or sinister style film, and that's not what it is. I think people were expecting to see blood, guts, and gore. And when I saw people
Mm,
reviewing it, they're like, "This is terrible. Nothing happens, and the little kid is annoying." I give it 0 out of 10, and I'm like, "What?"
yeah.
They're like, "I wasn't expecting to see that." So I feel like over here, at least, the marketing for the film totally failed exponentially because
Mm,
luckily for me, I didn't see the marketing for it, so I just watched the movie and I was
yeah.
blown away. I mean, I felt more of like a psychological drama, and there's a lot of horror metaphors in the movie. My feeling of the film is Essie Davis's character, she's mentally ill, and
Mm,
it's showing you her mental illness through the Babadook, through the horrors of that metaphor. And she's obviously dealing with grief, she's dealing with
yeah.
loss, mental illness, and that's the way that this movie's portrayed throughout the film. And the way that she portrays this mentally ill woman, I, I had goosebumps and everything. I don't know if you know this, but Essie Davis is my favourite actress of all time. She's
Yeah. Right. Okay.
she is unbelievable. I don't know if you've seen other films with her in it, but she's in a film called Justice of Bunny King, which is an Australian film.
Yep.
She's she's just incredible. Any film I see her in, I start crying. because she's just so good.
Oh,
But
right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know how big she is in Australia, but to me, she should be like way up high, but she's obviously not. But yeah, the Babadook man. Um, so how is it portrayed in Australia? Because that's one I really want to get into, the Babadook. Like, do people love it in Australia?
Oh yeah, yeah. We love it. We're very proud of it. I couldn't tell you about the advertising, man. I There wasn't much because
Hmm.
it was one of those Aussie horrors that gets limited screenings. Like it's like one session at this cinema, two sessions at that cinema. But I obviously just went into it blind, watched it, loved it. But then I started to see all the backlash and the hate, and I'm like, what? Why? And it's what you just said. It had been pitched in other countries and other parts of the world as like a slasher. And this synopsis right here sums it up. The Babadook relies on real horror rather than cheap jump scares. And unfortunately, people were pitched jump scares.
Hmm.
And instead of seeing a moving tale about mental illness and also a slow burn of an entity and a creature that's symbolic for something else, people were just like, I'm confused. What is this? Where's the blood? Where's the gore? Where's the jump
Yeah,
scares? I want my money back. That's essentially what
yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's gotten to read. So, I mean, I have seen some really positive reviews out there where people really understood the film, and I'm not saying that my understanding of the film is correct, but I feel like I had a good understanding, enough understanding to what the director Jennifer Kent was aiming for, and I think that was her aim, and I was taken aback by that. Whereas other people just didn't, not that they didn't understand, but they didn't take it the way they wanted it to. They were expecting this Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers style horror film with the Babadook killing people, and they didn't get what they wanted. Therefore, it's not a good film to them. So I feel like
Yeah.
it's a total disservice to the movie because the way the film was directed, it was beautifully shot. The cinematography was incredible. The acting was fantastic. I know that people say the worst part about the Babadook is the little kid. They think the little kid is annoying, but that's the little kid's character. That's what sends Essie Davis over the edge most of the time because she's trying to deal with the loss of her husband. She's trying to deal with a little kid that is probably ADHD or got some sort of spectrum. People are
Yep.
not understanding that. They're just seeing, oh, that's noisy. I don't like that. Where's the blood?
Yeah.
Where's the guts? And when I read some reviews for it, I'm like, oh, why? Why? It's I'm I get totally disheartened when I see some of the reviews for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. People just dismiss it as a film about an annoying screaming kid. But to me, that whole situation with the family is more of a horror tale in itself than the entity.
Hmm.
Whereas the entity is, symbolic for something else greater. Um, but to me, yeah, that's like a real world horror. Like when
Yeah.
you've lost a husband, a father, a child that may have some behavioral issues, on the spectrum, and that's how how do you adjust to make the child feel comfortable? It's all learning for not for you, but for them as well. It's all new.
Hmm.
That's that can be horrifying to anyone. Um, so yeah, I think it definitely has gained an afterlife, if that makes sense. Like it's definitely
Hmm.
gained that cult following, but it's gone. I think it's gone beyond cult now. People just appreciate it a lot more now. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It's like kind of renaissance, and people just take it on board now and appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
And then you have people that do video essays on it and do deep dives, and you're like, whoa, that you nailed it. Didn't think of that, but you nailed it. So yeah, it definitely is an absolute gem and a half of a horror film.
Yeah. And speaking of horror films that don't really concentrate on horror, there's a horror film. Well, I say it is horror, it's classed as horror. It's a suburban horror film and it's a true story as well. And it's called Hounds of Love. Have you seen Hounds of Love?
Haven't seen that one. No.
Oh, it's another hard watch. It's a true story about um, a girl that was on her way to school in
Hmm.
like a suburban built up area, and she was kidnapped in a plain sight in daylight, and she was taken into this like couple's house, and she was tortured like for days. I don't know if it was days, weeks, or months, but she was
Yep.
in, and the whole film's about her trying to escape in broad
Mm.
daylight. It's harrowing to watch. And
Oh
I watched
shit.
it not knowing it was a true story, and then I read up on it, and I'm like, holy shit, this thing is an actual true story. So I don't know how big it was or whereabouts in Australia it was set, but if you get a chance, you should definitely check it out because
What's it called
it's a
again?
Hounds of Love. I think it might be
Hound,
2015, 16 or something.
Hounds of Love. Okay. 2016. Oh man, that looks brutal. 1987, murderous couple John and Evelyn roam the streets of Perth, Australia, searching for their latest victim. Oh, okay. I got to check this out, man.
It's again, you maybe don't eat anything before it because it is a hard
No,
watch.
no, no. There's a shot of her chained to the bed, and she does not look good, and that's kind of enough for me for now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like it's it's one of these films that it's an important watch.
Yeah,
It's the way it's filmed as well. It's quite stylistic. It's a kind of stylistic horror film. I think they try and take your eyes off of some of the subject matter in it with some more
mm,
style and substance
yeah,
to it, rather than just saying this is like a torture porn film and we love it. That's not what it's like. It's got those elements to it, but it's more tasteful. And I think they have to be careful
yeah.
because it is a true story. So they deal with the subject matter in a better way, a more kind of way that you can go, okay, I'll accept watching this because of the way they do it. Um, so yeah, Hounds of Love. You should definitely check it out if you get the chance. Another
Got the
one.
tab open here, man. So I yeah definitely need to check that one out.
I'm going to give another recommendation before you mention any more. This one again is not really a horror film, but it's probably the most horrific film on this list because it is a true story. I take it you know the Port Arthur massacre.
Are you? Is it is this Nitram?
Yeah, so have you seen it, Nitram?
I was dead set that was going to be my next recommendation, along with Snowtown.
Right.
Like
Okay.
literally, yeah. So I respect the filmmakers for not acknowledging him as
Yeah.
Martin Bryant, and just calling him Nitram. So for people watching, it's just a reverse of the name Martin for Martin Bryant, who did committed the Port Arthur massacre back in '96, and that's why we have such a tight hold on gun control now because of that. Our prime minister at the time was like, "Fuck that." Big crackdown on guns, and yeah, this film, it's you need a shower afterwards, and you need to like watch an upbeat Pixar film after this one, because I've done my deep dives into the Port Arthur massacre because you just get curious and you feel dirty afterwards, man. And this film is no
Mhm.
exception.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
in that film, he and well, I'll start with this. In Scotland in 1996, we had a massacre called the Dunblane Massacre, and it was a guy called Thomas Hamilton who went into a school and killed 18 children and injured 15 as well. And it was a primary one, so it would probably, I don't know, it's like 5 year olds, sorry. So into this school, killed 18 5 year olds, and it was all over the news. It made world news. So after that, we had the same thing. We had gun control, no more guns, blah blah blah, and it was done. But then when I watched Nitram, and I realised uh, Martin or Nitram, he had the idea from the Dunblane massacre. He was watching the Dunblane massacre on TV in the movie, and I'm like,
yeah,
man, it hits home so much. And I feel like Nitram. I'm not saying movies should come out like Nitram and show the massacre. That's why I like Nitram because it doesn't show the massacre. It's the
mm,
build up to what the hell was this guy thinking, and it doesn't
yeah,
make you feel sorry for him. It just makes you feel sorry for the situation as it's leading up to the massacre. I don't think we'll ever see a Port Arthur massacre movie. I don't think we'll ever
no,
see a Dunblane massacre movie because there's certain things you just don't do. So the build up to this whole scenario, knowing what's going to happen in Nitram was enough because I was like, oh, this is horrendous. And then at the end of the movie, he goes to the little place in the little cafe at the end. He's got his bag
yeah,
with him, and then he walks out. And see when he walks out, I felt I didn't feel sorry for him. Like I said, I felt sorry for the situation that he got himself in because
Yeah.
nobody was really helping him. Nobody was really stopping him from doing what he wants to do. His parents were kind of like, so it's hard. And again, that's another film with Essie Davis from the Babadook. She plays the
Yep.
woman, and again, I started crying again. There was a scene in it where he's playing the piano in her house, and she sits down, and she's never really been out in the world. She sits down and looks at him. She goes, "You look like a movie star," and I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh." I was like, she's just incredible. But I think Nitram, just like Hounds of Love, you need to have patience to watch a film like that because it is quite hard hitting. Um, Nitram didn't really make the rounds in the UK or the US either, so I don't know how
Mm.
popular it is in Australia. Sorry, has it been has it been welcomed in Australia because of the subject?
Yeah, yeah, it has. We obviously don't glorify it. So like Martin Bryant is like you wouldn't recognize him now. He's like fat, bald, and gets the shit kicked out of him. In I think he's in Goulburn. I could be wrong. I don't know where he's locked up now, but yeah, he's we kind of just bury it and like you said, we don't need to see a movie about the events happening. We already know what happened, and we don't need to be reminded of that. And it's the same with what happened over your way with that massacre with those little teeny tiny kids. That's awful. That's like Sandy Hook.
Mhm.
um but I think it was, I wouldn't say a tasteful way because I don't want to put the word tasteful with Martin Bryant, but it was, I guess you could say, the classiest way to handle Martin Bryant
Mhm.
with Nitram. Obviously, with the flipping of his name, not acknowledging him, and not giving him the glory because that's what he wanted in the police interviews.
Yeah,
He
seen that.
kept with the officers. He's like, "How many people did I kill? How many people did I kill?" And he wanted to know his tally. And they're like, "We're not telling you that. Like, we don't want you to get your rocks off over knowing how many innocent people
Mhm.
eh, you've killed." So I don't need to. I'm happy with Nitram, even though it's a very bleak, dark film. And then that leads me into my next one, Snowtown. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard of it. I know it's the same director. Is it Justin Kurzak? Something like
Yes.
that. So same
Yeah.
director.
So
I've never seen it. I want to see it.
again, got to be in the mood, man. Make sure you got something fun queued up afterwards to watch. But yeah, it revolves around what eventually became the bodies in the barrels, the thing that happened here in Australia. And it's more like the grooming of a serial killer, like taken under a wing and grooming them to become a killer. And it's, yeah, it's dark, it's bleak. Much that's why I put Nitram and Snowtown together. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a true story?
It
Snowtown.
is, yeah. The bodies in the barrels happened a fair few years ago. But yeah, they
Right.
found some bodies in decomposing in barrels out in bushland. Yeah, so it is based on it, like Nitram's based on the Port Arthur massacre. Yeah,
Right. I'll need to check it out. When I was doing the list for this video, and I was looking up Nitram, I saw that he had the other film, Snowtown. So yeah,
yeah,
it's been added. It's been added to my list. Something a little bit more lighthearted. Well,
yep.
it's not really lighthearted. Is Australia's answer to the Blair Witch Project, and that is Lake Mungo. Have you seen Lake Mungo?
Years and years ago, like, yeah. Um, Hang on,
That
let me look. Let me get a
Lake
refresher
Mungo.
on that one.
Unfortunately for me, I didn't watch Lake Mungo when it was like hyped up. I only watched it like a year ago, and there was some imagery in it that I thought, "Whoa, that's pretty scary."
That's right. There we go. Lake Mungo. Yeah, 2008.
Yeah, and it's about a girl who went missing, and they were looking for this girl who went missing, but they think she's dead, and then this guy's got video cameras around the house, and he thinks he can see her in the
That's right.
CCTV footage and stuff.
Yep.
Um, but you kind of see back footage of her where she went missing and the lead up to where she apparently died and stuff. So there's some really shocking imagery in that film, and I thought, "Oh, it's actually pretty good." I heard it was great, and I thought I don't know if you're going to get great these days because found footage movies kind of died out when Lake Mungo came out.
Mm,
So I wasn't too excited about it. So I just stopped. I just never watched it. But then I thought, do you know what? I'll just watch it. Nothing else to watch. And
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
it was pretty decent. So I
I'm
feel
gonna
like,
have to get a refresher on this one, man. It has been so long, but I do remember
mhm,
just seeing some imagery, and I'm like, that's just giving me the heebie-jeebies. So yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch this one. It's been so long. Like, yeah, as soon as you
yeah.
said it, I'm like, oh my god, I
Uh,
forgot about that one.
yeah, when I was looking at YouTube videos of like top 10 Australian horror films just to see what other people in Australia would say is their top 10. And I think I watched like 6 of them and maybe
Mm,
half of them had Lake Mungo at number 1. I'm like, all right,
yep.
okay. Not bad. So yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. And I feel like if you like movies like The Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity, it's a good watch. But the good thing about Lake Mungo is a lot of it's about interviews, so it's not shaky cam. So you get to
Mm,
like enjoy it without going like this. So, oh, what's happening? So, yeah,
yes.
it's pretty decent. Um,
Yes, absolutely. My next one, very cliche, but it's recent. We're all very proud of it. And also being two YouTubers talking right now, you can't help but be proud. Talk to me. From
Absolutely.
the Raka Raka boys who are on YouTube and started out beating the shit out of each other in their backyard in Adelaide, and they've gone on to do Talk to Me and now possibly direct the new Street Fighter film. I think that's such an incredible story. But
Wow.
also the film itself, I loved it. I thought it was so well done. Some great imagery, some great makeup effects, a great concept. It just takes you to places that you're like, man, this is twisted. And like the Raka Raka boys, like they're nuts. They wouldn't hurt a fly, but they're just sticking to the walls, bombastic. Like their brain just must never stop. Like that's just them, and they've always been like that on their YouTube channel. I remember watching them like years and years ago, and one of them was dressing up as a coke addicted Ronald McDonald, and they're beating each other up, and now they're doing this. And yeah, it's just, and it's so cool to see it doing the rounds all over the world and people talking
Mhm.
about it, like, YouTube reviewers who are on the other side of the world talking about this. I'm like, oh man, that's it, kind of just, Aussie pride.
Yeah, yeah, but it must be a pride moment for you guys in Australia. I'd never heard of these guys. I never knew they were YouTubers until the advertising for Talk to Me. Talk to Me was my favorite horror film of, was it 2022? Yeah, 2022. No,
Last year, it was 2023,
what?
sure.
2023? Yeah, yeah. So sorry, it was, yeah. So it was my favorite horror film anyway. Um, there's something about Aussie horror when it comes to family that really gets you. There's like
Yeah.
when you see a horror film like Talk to Me or The Babadook, they've always got that kind of family. I wouldn't say problem, but there's issues within a family where maybe there's a parent who's died, or they're having
Mm,
sibling rivalry problems and stuff. And I think Talk to Me is a prime example. Obviously the main girl, her mum's passed away, and she
yeah.
wants to talk to her again, and that's the reason for that little boy holding on too much, too long and stuff. This It's not just about the horror. It's not just about the blood, guts, and gore. If we do get blood, guts, and gore, it's deeper than that, and I think that's why I appreciate Australian horror, because it's not just a cheap cash grab of a horror film. There's something more deep rooted in the story than just getting that horror element. Yes, of course, you love horror for horror, but you need to have some sort of story and you need to get behind your characters. And I think if you don't get behind your characters, you're lost. Whereas every great Australian horror film has great characters and great character development. So straight from the beginning and Talk to Me, you knew exactly who everyone was, you knew their backstory, who they were connected to, and then you went on that 90-minute journey with them, enjoying every moment, or maybe not enjoying, but loving every moment of the film. And like the end of Talk to Me, you can interpret Talk to Me in whatever way you want, and nobody's wrong. I don't know how you interpreted the movie where she sees her dad going up the elevator, I think, and then she goes out and she's pushing the little kid in the wheelchair down to the highway.
Yep. Yep.
I
And
don't know.
then, yeah, the imagery in that, I remember because I went to the premiere here in Sydney, and the Raka Raka boys were there in
Mhm.
attendance with the main actress from the film. Her name escapes me, but she was brilliant in it. I thought she did a great job.
Yeah.
And the audience was just howling, screaming, like oohs, ahs, and all that. Just that shot of her mum, not her mum, the old woman in the corner, and on all fours, slowly creeping towards. And I'm like, oh, man, this is so cool. This is great. This is it's shot so well, and it sparked so much discussion with people's views on what was going on. And that's
Mhm.
what I love. It creates this endless discussion. And like the first opening sequence, that one take shot, I thought was brilliant. And the
Yeah.
fact that the Raka Raka boys filmed an entire short revolving around that scene from different cell phone views, like, perspectives. I think that's genius as well.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, like obviously there's a big deep rooted issue with our main character and her family life. I want to see more, but at the same time, I'm just happy for them to just leave it at that. Go on to other things. I think it just needs to be left alone. But the concept itself, like, just, we've got teenagers these days that are, doing nitrous nangs and like whippets and vaping. And how about we talk to the dead and possess
Yeah.
ourselves and get that rush and see what happens? Like, I think that's kind of genius in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a genius way to. It's almost like a modern day Ouija board. Instead of having your Ouija board, you're holding
Yep.
onto the hand. It's like a hip, cool way for the kids to acknowledge it's. And I think that's another genius marketing ploy for Talk to Me. Is not only does it get the older viewers because it's a really good, intelligent movie, but it gets the younger viewers coming in as well because they want to see what this hand can do, and they'll probably do that themselves later on. So I think it's a film for everyone. I think like older and newer audiences that love horror films, and luckily it's a successful movie. I think it made like 40 odd $1 million in the US as well, which is phenomenal for an Australian film. Um, I think it is one of the highest grossing Australian horror films of all time. That must
It
be
is pretty
surely.
much, yeah. And the fact
Yeah,
that A24 picked it up for an
yeah.
Aussie film is huge. So the boys are from Adelaide. They filmed it in Adelaide. They got a partial grant from Screen Australia, which is great to help like partially fund the film. And then obviously
Mhm.
A24 came in and did their thing. So it made a lot of money, but it also was just a proud moment for like, oh man, like these, like anything's possible. You start out on YouTube and then you're making a horror movie, and then the next minute you're supposedly directing the next Street Fighter film. You don't know
Mhm.
what's around the corner.
Yeah, it's nuts. But when I watched the trailer for it the first time, I didn't know it was Australian. I thought their accents sounded like South African or some sort of like islands, like maybe the Fiji Islands or something. It sounded really a really thick Australian accent. Um, I don't like, I can pick up accents from where I am from. Like I know which city people are from. Can you pick up accents quite fast in Australia? Like you can say, "Oh, that person's from Perth. That's Sydney, etc." Or they're all the same.
No, no, not really. Across the board, the accent's pretty much the same, unless if you're like from like in Sydney, if you're out west or something like that, it's like, hey, how you going, mate? What's going on? Like it's really
Yeah.
ochre and like bit rough. But like
Yeah.
someone from Perth would talk like this as well. But no, I'm marrying a South African woman, so I would definitely know it.
So it didn't sound South African at all then. It was the person with the hand, the person that owned the hand, and his friend who smokes all the time, the girl that smokes.
Yeah.
It's those two. And
No,
when I watched those two, I'm like, oh, is this South African? But it's obviously not. It was Australian.
No, they're because I remember looking them up too. Like, yeah, they're Aussie. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'd like to think I have a South African accent down pat. It's a very interesting accent. it's
Have you,
such a weird accent.
I know this is off topic, but have you seen District 9?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The prawns, the prawns.
Oh yeah, I love the South African accent. I love films like Blood Diamond and District 9. I know they're probably not accurately South African, but I'm sure there's a few South Africans like Charlton Copley.
Yes.
who've got a really cracking South African accent, and sometimes I do get South Africans mixed up with Australian, but that's my bad.
It depends. Well, like Chloe's accent's pretty watered down. It's like I call it a mongrel mix. It's like bit of South African, bit of Australian, and at times a bit of British. And I'm like, she gets a little bit,
Yeah.
and then like when she'll talk to her parents back home, she goes like full back into South African. Like, no, 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 mum, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. No, oh shame, man, shame. Just and then as soon as she's off the phone, it's back to the mongrel mix accent. So it's very
Yeah.
funny to like see it all happen. And then when she's with her sister and they start like being sisters and like the South African accents are like thick again. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's very funny to watch.
Speaking of accents, I watched your Uncharted movie, and you have got a really good American accent. Is that an American accent you were doing?
Yeah, yeah, man. Thank you, thank you. That was yeah, it was hard to do. It was hard to maintain on like long shooting days.
Yeah.
Because it's funny enough, because Davey Deathray did an interview with myself, Daniello, and Sarah, the directors of Uncharted, and yeah, he was asking about the accent. So I did do a vocal warm up between like before each shooting day, which was actually from Hugh Jackman, funny enough. So that was handy. You
Lovely.
yeah, you just there's like one sentence that contains every consonant, vowel, and everything, and you say it in the accent you want to do, and it like essentially just primes all your muscles that you don't
Yeah.
usually use.
Mhm.
Whereas, where do you talk like this when hey guys, I'm Barry? Like you guys are very tip of the tongue. I find it's weird. It's where Australians are here at the chin, like Scottish accent, tip of the tongue, and then American is diaphragm, and it's science you wouldn't even think of.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
And
It's strange.
there were certain words I like. It would take a couple of takes. Like
Mhm.
for some reason, waterfall was really hard for like waterfall. I'm like, how the
Waterfall.
fuck you say yeah? It was see yeah you go, you got it. But I think
Yeah.
also like when you're like when you're nervous and you're like, oh, there's a big scene, and you just kind of just because I like. And you're probably the same. I get tongue tied a lot when I do YouTube videos, and
Yeah.
thank fuck for jump cuts and all that, because there'll be times where I'll sound like a broken record. I'm like, blip, 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 blip. I'm like, dude, like I'll be editing. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Why do you stutter so
And that's in your
much?
own accent as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think also because especially when it comes to a movie review, I don't know if you're the same. You're like trying to get all this mess out of this thing here, and you just get a bit overwhelmed. You're like, oh my god, I got so many thoughts, and you just like it's like your words trip over each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm like as well. I mean, I can probably do every accent ever, but I can only do it if someone from that country says the line and I say it back to them. So, but if they
So,
say, "Right,
okay. All right. I can do it. I'll do an impression of you. Are you ready?
I'm ready."
And scene. Hi guys, it's Barry. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna talk about Wolf Creek. And it's a really good horror film. That's all I got.
That's actually pretty good. I've heard worse. I mean, Mel Gibson can't do that good.
I'll take it.
That's pretty good. Okay, right, I'm gonna do my Chris Stanley impression. You ready?
Hell yeah. All right, I'm ready.
Oh, oh no. Right, here we go. Face for me. Hey guys, I'm Chris Stanley, and I'm going to be doing a review for Wolf Creek. Good night, mate. That's it.
Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah, stereotypical. I'm sorry.
No, no, man. No, it's yeah, look, again, I've heard worse. I think the best one I've heard on film was Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder. Like, I don't
Was it
know how
good?
the hell he did it, and he maintained it at like the climax of the film. I'm like, man, it is hard. Like,
Mm.
we've got a really weird accent. But
I like the
some
Australian
people.
accent.
Um, but we do butcher a lot of words. I find that a few people like, let's face facts. The comment section of YouTube is to be corrected and also made fun of because of your accent. That's
Mm.
the only reason a YouTube comment section exists, and like
Yeah.
I'll say certain words or names, and someone's like, it's actually pronounced like this. I'm like, yeah, but I have an accent. You say it differently. So it's
Yeah.
like tomato, tomato,
Yeah. Tomato.
tomato.
Tomato. Well, we actually don't say tomato or tomato. We actually say tomata.
Tomato.
So we tomata.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well,
Tomato.
it depends. Like if you're really posh from Scotland, you would say tomato. But if you're from Glasgow, we say pass me the tomatoes. Like I see the way I'm speaking to you just now, but I don't really speak like this in real life because the way I speak in real life, it's harder to understand. So I'm speaking proper Scottish right now. Whereas if I'm talking to my mates, I would say, "All right, mate, how you doing?" And you'd be like, "What?" So it's kind of different online. I try my best to for people to understand me, but I still get the trolls saying that I'm not speaking English. I'm like,
Oh
okay,
man, yeah. Again, those are the people with problems. But like, I
yeah,
feel even if you were speaking how you normally speak with your mates to me, because we get told a lot we talk too fast and that we need subtitles. So like, I feel like I could have a full blown conversation if you were doing your natural, relaxed, vocab.
yeah,
But it's like in the UK where it's like certain slang words. It's just like, all right, like just like it's just like how we're always like, hey, you going, and we don't want you to answer it. Like it's just like, hey, you going, and like you say that in the States, and it's like, hey, you going, they're like, oh, good, thanks, and you're like, no, I was
yeah.
just saying hi.
Yeah, it's rhetorical.
Yeah, it's rhetorical, mate. I don't want to know about your day. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, just a passing by.
Yeah.
Um, it was, do you know what I'd noticed on my list? There's not a lot of old Australian horror films on my list. I've wrote a couple down, but
Mm,
when I watched them again, they didn't really age that well. Like films
yeah.
like Road Games with Jamie Lee Curtis. Have you seen that one?
I have not. So when it comes to old Aussie horror, man,
It's
again,
not.
I'd have to play catch up. Like I remember, there's one I wouldn't call it a horror film. It's like a thriller, and it's called FX, like FX with
Oh,
Brian Brown,
Brian
and
Denny and Brian Brown.
yeah, and he's a
Yeah.
special effects makeup artist, and yeah, like that's been a while since I've seen that one. But I'm always also obviously because of what I do with like props and all that. I'm like, oh, that I remember seeing that when I was young. I'm like, this is so good.
Yeah.
And Brian Brown's like a national treasure. And yeah,
Yeah, I remember when I had like we had cable TV growing up, and we would get the movie channels, and there's always adverts for these new movies that were coming out, and always remember, I still remember to this day the trailer for FX2. Well, I don't know if it's called the same in your country, but we called it FX2: The Deadly Art of Illusion, and it was the sequel, and it had that like a clown in it, as like a big
oh
blow
yeah,
up clown or something like that. And that's the only thing I really remember about FX2 is the actual trailer that we saw back in 1991 or something like that. And I have seen those movies, but I've not seen them for years. But it's the same with all Australian horror films. I try and watch them, and they're just not connecting with me. It feels like from the noughties upwards, that's when
yeah.
Australian horror really picked up. There was a really old one that I really loved called Fortress. It was like back in
Hmm.
'85 or '86 about this teacher who takes her kids into the jungle or something like that. Like a school teacher, and they all get
Yeah.
held hostage. And I tried to watch it again, and I'm like, I can't. It's not connecting with me anymore. Like like the newer ones are doing. Um, there is there is a horror. I don't know if you've heard of this one. It's an Australian horror, but it's got American and British actors in it. And it's called Gone from 2006. Have you heard of that?
Have not seen Gone, man. What's that one about?
So do you know Scott Miklowicz from Eurotrip? Have you seen Eurotrip?
Yes, 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 yes.
Scotty doesn't know. So
Yep.
it's him. He's an American guy backpacking in Australia, and he meets up with these two British. I'm sure they're British backpackers, and he's been in Australia for quite a while. So he's like, well, I'll take you around. I'll show you the ropes. And as he's taking them around, he takes them like further and further away from people, civilization, into the wilderness, into the outbacks, and he tries to kill them. So they're trying to get away from Scott McCluick's all the way through the film. So it's a pretty good film. It's kind of like a tame version of Wolf Creek, and
Yep.
it's obviously not a true story. And it feels like it's trying to ride on the coattails of Wolf Creek because it came out a year later as well. So it's like a cheaper version, but it's still a worthwhile watch, and it's got some good acting in it as well. And if you like scenery, if you like the Australian scenery, then I would recommend it. Not for you because you live in Australia, but for people who like the look of Australia and can't actually
Mm,
go, then I think a film like Gone would be quite good to watch because there is some really nice scenery in the film. Other
yeah.
than that, though, it's not like a memorable, groundbreaking movie or anything. It's just a good film. Um, and again, it's one I would
I
recommend if you've got time.
I think I think the biggest problem with like 70s and 80s Aussie horror, it was so low budget. The
Hmm.
story, even if it's a banger of a story, can get lost in the low budget, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I've got one final one, and it's very mainstream, and it's supposed to be set in the States, but it's The Invisible Man from Lee Winnell from 2020.
Yeah.
Um, so that was filmed here in Sydney, down the coast at a place called Kiama, which is about an hour and a half away. And I've been fortunate enough to work at Odd Studio, who made the suit, the invisible lens suit for the film.
Wow.
So I got to see, like, when I got there to work, that like the film had come and gone, like it already been out, but they built their own suit for the shop. And they had all the 3D printed silicon lenses all over this wetsuit, and I like that concept. I'm like, okay, you're keeping it like modern with like the lenses, and they reverse mirror and all that, but then obviously like the underlying issue of like domestic violence and abusive relationships, mental abuse and physical abuse and stuff like that. But then like those little gem moments where um Elizabeth Moss meets her sister in the Chinese restaurant, and the knife
Oh,
is hovering right next to her, and it just slashes her throat. And I'm like, and that Chinese restaurant was an old nightclub I used to go to when I was 18 and a club rat. I kid you not.
wow.
Kid you not, man. I remember stumbling around that area where, and yeah, it used to be a nightclub called Tank, and it was down an alleyway, and you can see in the film it's down an alleyway. And now it's this really like posh Chinese restaurant. And I remember when that scene happened, I'm like, oh, what? Like this, and just that idea of, is she going crazy? Like in her head, she's going crazy. No one believes
Mhm.
her. And they fucked up in the trailer when they gave that shot away when she throws the paint on him. And when she's in the attic, I'm like, man, you should have saved that for the final film, not included that in the trailer. But there are
Mhm.
certain scenes. So you know how she's staying with her cop friend Marcus,
Yeah.
and his daughter, and when she go, you know, she's taking baby steps to go out and check the mail and all
Uh-huh.
that. It's supposed to be set in the United States, and we don't have mailboxes with the little flags that you pop up. They
Mhm.
had to import from the United States one of those letterboxes to put out the front of that house. And when when you see her out on the street, you can see gum trees, and gum trees are only in Australia. And like I remember watching the film at the premiere, I'm like, that's a gum tree. You're taking me out of this experience. This is supposed to be the United States. What's going on?
Yeah. 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 I
But
get
I really liked it, man. What are your thoughts on this one?
that. The Invisible Man again was my favourite film of 2020. It was a fantastic film. I knew it was a Australian produced movie, luckily for me, because I'm not from Australia, I don't see those little tidbits like in the streets and
Mm,
stuff, so it doesn't take me out of the film. But yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I love Lee Winnell anyway. I loved Upgrade that he'd done a couple of years with prior.
yes.
So yeah,
Yep.
Lee Winnell was fantastic, and I'm glad he's getting the recognition that he's getting now, especially with the success of The Invisible Man. Especially as well, the Invisible Man was one of the last movies to be released theatrically before COVID hit. It came out in like
Yes.
February,
Right.
January. That was the last movie I watched at the cinema before COVID shut everything down. So it's quite a memorable time for when that film came out, and luckily it
Mm,
just made good money before cinemas started to kind of window down, because that could have been a disaster had that movie come out a couple of weeks later, and Lee Winnell would have been unsuccessful. Unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Luckily, though, made a lot of money, and he's getting all the success he deserves. Yeah, it's a fantastic film.
Because he's doing the Wolfman now, I believe.
He is, yeah. And it's
So
Ryan
that's good.
Gosling. I think Ryan
I
Gosling's the Wolfman, isn't
think so. I believe so. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I loved it. I love the concept, and the bloke's name escapes me, who was in Haunting of Hill House, who plays the boyfriend, the abusive boyfriend. He was great in it. Great ending.
it?
I just really dug it at all, and just a fresh take on the Invisible Man instead of bandages, around the head
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It just made sense for the age that we live in now of modern tech.
Yeah. You think sometimes when they modernize something, it won't work, but I think they've done it in a way that is actually believable, which is good. And like you
Mm,
said as well, because it is Australian, you've got that deep connection of the character building. Like, she's been abused by her boyfriend, she wants to leave him, and you don't really get that in other Invisible Man movies. It's not that deep. Whereas this one's got, it's such a deep film. So straight from the beginning, you fear for this girl before the Invisible Man even shows up. Shows up, you can't see him, but you feel for this character all the way through the movie, and you genuinely feel for her because everyone thinks she's going crazy. She's not seeing him; he's
mm,
dead. When he's not dead, it's great. So yeah, Invisible Man is another one. It's one that I didn't add to my list because it's not set in America. It's not set in Australia. Sorry. Um, I'll give
true.
you one,
Yeah.
but I'll give you one more one that's very similar to Invisible Man in terms of production. It's an Australian
Mhm.
film, but it's an American. It's supposed to be American. It's got
Yep.
American actors in it, I believe. Have you seen Better Watch Out?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I have. Yeah. 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 I have.
yeah. And I don't know if it's the same. Like, it's filmed. I think it's filmed in Australia as well. Um, but the
Hang
snow,
on. I'm
and do you get
I'm
a lot of
bringing
snow?
it up now, man.
Yeah, I'm going to check IMDb for it.
That's right. 2016. Okay. God, it's been a minute since I've seen this one. I remember enjoying this one. This one was good. Yeah, that's right. On a quiet suburban street, a babysitter must defend a 12-year-old boy from intruders, only to discover it's far from a normal home invasion.
Yeah,
Locations. Where did they film this one? Oh, yeah,
New.
Morgue Park, Sydney. That's half an hour down the road from me, Fox Studios.
Yeah. So it's a studio lot. So that's where they got the snow from. Then
Yeah,
I take you.
yeah, that's it. The Snow Machine on Fox Studios.
Yeah, 'cause I was going to say maybe you would have recognised some of the streets, but obviously if it was filmed on the lot, then it's just the studio. But yeah, that's another little sleeper hit that came out of nowhere. Uh, Directed, shot in Australia, but nobody really knows it's Australian because it's got American or mostly American actors. Maybe there's some Australian actors in that.
The
There's
director hasn't done much at all.
Have they not?
He did 7 episodes of Wolf Like Me, then Better Watch Out, then something called Undocumented. But yeah, he
Oh
hasn't
yeah,
done much. Hmm.
Undocumented is the one with Scott McCluix as well. Scotty doesn't know from
Oh,
Eurotrip.
okay.
He's in everything now.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so yeah, it's a
Dacre
fun.
Montgomery's in it. Patrick Warburton. I forgot about this.
Yeah, it's a good film. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times now. I watch it every Christmas now. It's a Christmas
It's a good
tradition for
Christmas
me.
movie.
It's a great Christmas movie. It's like Home Alone, but a realistic Home Alone. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like what if Kevin didn't hold back with Harry and Marv?
yeah. Or what would actually happen if you get hit by a paint can? And this is exactly what happens if you get hit by a paint can. Something completely different to Harry and Marv. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one that maybe people wouldn't know was Australian. And I guess when I say I guess, I think a lot of people have seen this movie now. When I ask people what's your favourite Christmas horror films, they tend to now say Better Watch Out, which is good because it's getting the
Hmm.
recognition again that it
Yeah.
deserves. So it is a good one. So I would definitely check it out.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so do you, before we finish up, do you have any other recommendations that you've maybe mm, not mentioned?
Ooh. like obviously they're not horror movies, but they can be pretty brutal. Like the Mad Max films
Yeah, they're great.
are pretty good watches. Like especially the first one, given how maverick and guerrilla it was, and what George Miller did. And like obviously he's about to bring Furiosa out. Um, like there, like we've had so many like backyard, low budget, bordering on snuff films. Like you'd have to go into the deep recesses of IMDb and like Australian only horror from 70s, 80s, like pure grindhouse rough
Hmm.
stuff. Um, but obviously, like I said at the beginning of the video, Barry, like obviously our claim to fame is Wolf Creek.
Yeah,
We wear that badge of honor with pride. I think that's pretty much like a lot of our stuff can be like science fictiony horror. Like Mad Max is very, a post-apocalyptic action, but like they're brutal films. Like
yeah.
those films are brutal.
Yeah, they're always in the same kind of category as the older horror films back in the 80s and 90s when I was in the video stores. You would always see Mad
Mm,
Max and movies like the post-apocalyptic movies right next to the horror films. So they would always be they'd always coincide with each other all the time. Um, but yeah, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel like Australian horror is like a subgenre of its own. And if someone
yeah.
says, um, wh- what would you classify The Loved Ones as? What kind of film? I'd say well, it's a Aussie horror. Some people say ozploitation as well, but I think that's more kind of grindhouse Australian horror
Yeah.
when it comes to Oz. Is it ozploitation? Ozploitation? Yeah,
Ozploitation.
yeah,
I'd call loved ones. You'd be like psychological horror, gore, all mashed into one.
yeah, yeah. I know. So yeah, I think that's us done then, Chris. Um,
This has been
before
fun,
we,
mate. It's
as
like I've also walked away with a list now of what I do need to catch up on.
the first thing I need to watch from your list is Snowtown because I've heard good things about it. And I
Mm,
think the fact that you know about it means I do need to check it out because it's one that does look good. If I had to recommend any to you, the first one I would say is Hounds of Love. That's a
yep. Yeah, I definitely want to check that one out.
Yeah, it's a really good one. And again, it'll make you want to have a shower after it, but it is a good film. It's really good.
Again, like with Snowtown, you got to be in the mood, mate.
Yeah, same with Hounds of Love. If you're in the mood,
Yeah.
sit down, watch it. Maybe watch it alone because I don't know if anybody would appreciate you watching it with them. I'm not too
I,
sure.
I I don't think my fiance that's her jam. Like her usual thing is Disney.
Yeah. Oh well, it's far from Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, Chris, I know you've got two channels. I think a lot of people know you as Cosplay Chris. That's how I
Yep.
started watching you. In fact, before we even go, I remember about I don't know, it must have been about 6 or 7 years ago, however long it's been. My son loves like Marvel figures and stuff like that, and I would always buy him the like Marvel Legends instead of like the cheap fake ones that you get. I would always buy him the
Yeah.
top of the
Yeah.
range stuff, and he would always say,
Yeah.
"Oh, the head doesn't look that good." So we would always like YouTube how to make figures look better or how to make props look better. And the first thing that always came up was your videos, and I clicked on your video. I'm like, this guy does really amazing work. So I think you were one of the first people I ever subscribed to on YouTube when it was a
Oh,
thing.
that's
So
so good.
wear that with a badge of honor. But I subscribed to it, and I just kind of watched all your stuff, and I'm like, this guy, this guy buys cheap crap, and it makes it look so good. It's unbelievable. So we just kind of watched you, and we've watched you for so long that my son knows who you are, which is it's crazy to after all these years that you're on my channel. It's quite cool. But yeah, so Cosplay Chris is or was your main channel. Um, and even on that channel, I'd noticed that you'd done a lot of horror stuff. I think horror was a lot of your passion
Mm,
projects.
yeah.
But what made you want to do like a separate channel just for horror? Is it because you're a big horror fan?
Yeah, I should have done it years ago, mate. And like it just means like videos on the Cosplay Chris channel are a bit more spaced out now. So they're pure like that channel is purely reserved for build videos now. Like if I'm building a cosplay, a prop, a custom collectible, whatever, that's just for that channel. Just means it's going to be spaced out a bit more. So, there's just going to be a longer wait between videos. Whereas this channel, Chris Stanley, it's just all talking, movie reviews, entertainment news, commentary, stuff like that. I should have done it ages ago just to keep the build videos separate from the talking videos. And then don't get me wrong, like a lot of talking videos on the main Cosplay Chris channel did really well. Like, my God, when I did, and you did a video too, like the first look of Dave McRae as Freddy Krueger, that
Oh
got like
yeah.
300,000 views.
Oof.
I was like, what the hell? And then Cecil contacted me and he's like, dude, thank you. I'm like, you can't pick it. I'm like, there'll be other times where I do a talking video. I'm like, this one's going to be a winner. I put a lot of hard work into it and it gets like bugger all views. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I just need to start a separate channel where it's just all movie reviews, commentary, entertainment news, where people who sign up for it know exactly what they're getting. Whereas people on the Cosplay Chris channel, like, what are you doing, man? I thought you were building something and now you're doing a review or you're talking about the latest photo released of X, Y, and Z, and it can get confusing.
Yeah, I get
Um,
that.
so yeah, like, mate, I should have done it years ago, but I'm having so much fun with the second channel because it's just it's definitely a muscle you have to keep flexing when it comes to like movie reviews and stuff like that. There definitely is a bit of an art form to it, and like we all do it differently of how you critique a film and like your method, the method to your madness of how you talk about a film and how you structure it. So I love it, and I love my little routine. Like usually every Thursday a film will come out here. So tomorrow is Abigail, so I'm going to take myself to my local theater just down the road, like 2 minutes away. Watch Abigail, plonk myself down here when I'm done, and just do my review. And I love it. And, just gaining a nice little community. So it's been real fun, man. But again, like I always love building. Like I'm constantly building. Like at the moment, and you'll get a kick out of this, I'm building a glove. I haven't built a glove in a very long time.
Yeah.
Um, so, now and then I'll dabble in that. Batman stuff. Like I've got a life-size part one Fred Krueger just staring at me right now with his two fingers cut off. But then obviously, like you see all this stuff back here. So, a lot of it has come from other builders. I love collecting other builders' work.
Yeah.
The next big cosplay is the Christopher Reeve Superman in a couple of weeks. So that'll be
Oh,
fun.
that'll be nice.
Yeah, yeah, man, you got to watch what you eat. That suit is not forgiving. Like it doesn't hide anything.
I'm on a diet just now, so that'll be fine.
Yeah,
So yeah.
so no, I really appreciate that, and that you and your son, found my videos that way. It's cool. I still have a lot of people, yeah, coming up to me like at cons, and they're like, "My son and I did one of your tutorials. We put a weekend aside." I'm like, that's the best feeling ever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a great feeling. I mean, my channel is nowhere near as big as your channel, but like I would go to cons and people would come up and say, "Oh, can I get a photograph with you?" And I'm like, it's surreal. Like, people watch your videos, and then when they meet you in real life, they appreciate you. And I think that's the best thing about having a YouTube channel is knowing that people get something out of your videos. And I think with tutorial videos and the stuff that you do, it's unbelievable because I think maybe 98% of the world can't do what you do.
Mm.
So I think getting stuff like tutorials the way you do it, it helps people try their best and do what they can. So it's good that you've got that separate channel, and then obviously you've got the horror related, or not just horror, but movie related stuff as well, which is good because obviously those videos can vary in size. Like you can get a 2 hour video, you can get a 5 minute video if it's like a news update and stuff like that. So I get it. I think it's a good idea that you are separating your movies to your other work because people are just going to see, like, they go into your cosplay stuff, they want to see your cosplay stuff, they don't want to see a movie review. So it makes sense that you're doing it that way. And your channel that you've just started is big already. How many subscribers have you got in the new one?
I just hit 11,500 today, actually, so it's getting there.
That's fast as well.
Um, yeah, it's just you've just got to keep the momentum going, like you do, man. Like you're smashing it out. You're gaining subscribers, so it's good. Like your thumbnails are so sexy. Like like every time a new video pops up, I'm like, oh, jeez, look at that layering, look at that. Like it's all beautiful. So it's good to see that too as well. Like I was my dream is one day that in one room it's going to be you, me, Dave McRae, Darren, Frank, Drum Dums, just Mike and Jay. Like I think that'd just be like the United Nations of Horror.
A bit expensive flight wherever we're going.
Oh shit, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I wanted to go to H45, but we had Uncharted stuff to take care of, and we had PAX where we had a preview of Uncharted, so obviously that was a priority. So
Yeah,
hopefully next time, man. But like I said, I will be in Glasgow next year, so that'll be fun. Hopefully we can do something then.
that'd be good. Yeah, and you're going to be very close to me. I'm going to H50 as well when it eventually comes. So if you go to that, we can all meet up for that as well.
I'm gonna have to go, man, especially because it's 50, and obviously because I couldn't
Yeah,
make 45. But I think I owe it to myself. Just go do it, and if
yeah.
you're going and everyone else is going, I think that'd be amazing.
Oh, it'd be fantastic. I mean, we should definitely film something if we're all in the same area. Be great.
Yep, for sure.
But anyway, um, for those of the guys who don't know who you are, if they don't, where can they find you?
So on YouTube, my main channel with all the cosplay stuff, costume stuff is Cosplay Chris. And then with my second channel, which I'm like really busting my ass to get the momentum going, is just called Chris Stanley. And yeah, just movie reviews, entertainment news, commentary, just anything and everything. But, focusing a lot on horror as well. And it's kind of just liberating doing that. I love horror, I love talking about horror, especially like with Freddy. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'll leave all your links down below as well, anyway, for those of
Thank you,
the
man.
guys that are watching the video. And this is obviously going to be an edited video as well, so hopefully we'll get some video footage of the films that we were talking about, so it's not just our lovely faces all the way through the video, even though they are quite nice. So yeah, for those of you who are watching, anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me, Barry. Thanks, everyone.
Meeting adjourned.
Be right back!
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat? Someone's in the back! See!